Hi everyone, in part two of this two-part video series, we are going to now review questions 6 through 10 from our Gallery of American Voices close reading assignment. Question number 6 says, how would you describe the tone of Samuel Adams' quote? Support your answer with text evidence. So let's take a look at this quote. It says, if ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hand which feeds you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Now, first off, let's consider his audience. Who is Sam Adams talking to? Well, he's talking about American colonists that were not interested in fighting for independence. And we can see this in the contrast or the juxtaposition that we have at the beginning half of this particular quote. So if ye or if you love wealth better than liberty, so if you like money and security more than you love freedom, if you love the tranquility or the peace of being a servant more than you love the invigorating contest of freedom, then go home from us in peace. It says, get out, just go home, right? We're not going to ask for your counsel, and we're not going to ask for you to stand up and fight. Now here's where we really hear the tone kick in. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. Of course, that would have been King George, right? So he's not just saying, all right, you're welcome to leave. If you're not with us, you can head home. And when you do, get down and lick the hands which feed you. That is so strong. May your chains, think like the chains of servitude, the chains of slavery, set lightly upon you. And may posterity, which is all like history, your ancestors, may we forget that you were our countrymen. So we hear some really rich sarcasm here, right? He doesn't mean, oh, I hope your chains set lightly upon you. He's directly calling you, all right, you want to be a slave, be a slave, right? You want to stay under King George's rule? All right, just make sure that you you crouch down and lick his hands and know your place, right? So the tone that we really hear in Adams' speech, the emotion that he's expressing towards these Americans that are not interested in independence could maybe be described as condescending. He's disgusted, very dismissive. And we really hear that in that second half with these phrases like crouch down and lick the hand which feeds you. May your chains set lightly upon you, of course, which is meant sarcastically. And may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. All right, number 7. According to J. Hector St. John de Crevecoeur, what are 3 ways in which Americans differ from Europeans? Now, this is a very different text altogether. So this is an excerpt from a book entitled What is an American? Hector St. John de Crevecoeur, of course, was a French-American farmer who wrote about early American life, just sort of, observations of what life in this very, very young country was like. And in this particular piece, he's really drawing some very strong differences between early Americans and Europeans. So let's focus in on this highlighted section in yellow. He writes, he is arrived on a new continent. A modern society offers itself to his contemplation, different from what he had hitherto seen. It is not composed, as in Europe, of great lords who possess everything and a herd of people who have nothing. Here are no aristocratical families, no courts, no kings, no bishops, no ecclesiastical dominion, no invisible power giving to a few a very visible one. No great manufacturers employing thousands, no great refinements of luxury. The rich and the poor are not so far removed from each other as they are in Europe. Some few towns excepted, we are all tillers of the earth, from Nova Scotia to West Florida. We are a people of cultivators scattered over an immense territory, communicating with each other by means of good roads and navigable rivers, united by the silken bands of mild government, all respecting the laws without dreading their power, because they are equitable. We are all animated with the spirit of an industry which is unfettered and unrestrained, because each person works for himself. So again, in describing these early Americans and life in early America, we make some strong contrast from the world in which these people came, which would have been Europe. So let's look at three main differences that he highlights here. One could be that in America, all the wealth is not concentrated in a small handful of people like kings and lords and bishops, right? Instead, that wealth, at least at this time, was more evenly distributed. So you didn't have this huge class structure or hierarchy in which a small group had everything and then the masses had nothing. A second strong difference that he highlights is that Americans respect and abide by the laws of the land because these laws are considered both mild and fair. Now, King George's laws were not perceived as fair. They were considered to be tyrannical, right? And so no wonder people wanted to overthrow them. No wonder people wanted to work around them. But in America, the government is considered mild and the laws are considered fair. So another distinct difference is that people abide by them. They follow them. A third difference could be the Americans themselves. He describes them as being hard workers and most of them being farmers or cultivators, everyone who's digging in the earth to build this new nation from the ground up. And they all seem to be really energized by this spirit of self-determination, right? If you look at Europe, particularly England and its feudal roots, right? You had people who were working their entire lives, but they never really saw the benefit of all of their work because that wealth had to be distributed up the chain of command, right? All the way up to the king. But in America, people work hard because they know that they are going to benefit directly from their efforts. Question number 8 says, after listening to the excerpt of George Washington's farewell address, which of the following is not a tone that applies to this passage? Now, this was a unique source in that it wasn't a purely primary source. You guys watched a video in which we had an underscore from Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton, and then we also have incorporated into that particular piece of music an excerpt from George Washington's actual farewell address that was read aloud by then President Barack Obama. So what we're listening for here is which of these tones is not represented in that particular speech. Now, whenever you're trying to identify tone, you have to make sure first that you understand what each of these emotions are. Contented, right? A feeling of happiness, feeling that you have enough, feeling that what you've done is enough. Pretentious is definitely a word that is connected with like ego, someone who's really stuck on themselves or feels very highly about themselves. Reflective might be kind of nostalgic. You're kind of looking back over the ages, thinking about, your contributions and what all has unfolded. And then proud is just that sense of satisfaction with what has been accomplished. So let's go ahead and we'll actually, rather than listen, take a look at that particular excerpt from George Washington's actual farewell address. And we can see the 3 tones that are represented, which will lead us to our answer, which is the one that is not. Though in reviewing the incidents of my administration, I am unconscious of intentional error, I am nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. I shall also carry with me the hope that my country will view them with indulgence, and that after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service with an upright zeal, the faults of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, as I myself must soon be to the mansions of rest. So if we just look at the first half here, we hear him talking about, reviewing the incidents of his administration, going back and thinking about all of the things that have occurred, not just over his presidency, but his 45 years of service to our nation. Remember, George Washington was the general who carried us through the Revolutionary War. So we definitely hear that reflective tone. And then we also hear him admitting to the fact that, no doubt I've made mistakes, but I hope you understand that they were mistakes that were made, with my best intention, and hopefully these mistakes will be forgiven and forgotten, right? Anyone who's willing to admit to mistakes is definitely someone who is very humble, very, very humble. I anticipate with pleasing expectation that retreat in which I promised myself to realize the sweet enjoyment of partaking in the midst of my fellow citizens, the benign influence of good laws under a free government, the ever favorite object of my heart. I really love this selection here, because what he's talking about is how excited he is to lay down his power and to just get to live in this amazing new country that they have built. Now he gets to be a participant. He gets to sit next to his fellow citizens and enjoy all of the work that they have done. And in that case, we hear great pride. So the one tone that we do not hear, because it certainly does not apply to this individual, is pretentiousness or pretension. Question number 9, which statement describes the main argument of Sojourner Truth's speech? Now we're jumping ahead in history here. Sojourner Truth was an early women's rights activist, but the unique characteristic of her identity is she was also an ex-slave. So this is a woman who was fighting specifically for the voices of Black women amidst the early women's suffrage movement. Very, very early. We're talking time of the Civil War. So if we look at some of the things that she says very plainly, very simply in her speech, which is sort of the beauty of its poignancy, she says, look at me, look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could heed me. And ain't I a woman? She says, look at all that I've accomplished. But am I not also a woman that you would consider the same as a white woman right along me? Should I not have those same rights, those same protections, those same courtesies? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? She continues in this next highlighted section. She says, then they talk about this thing in the head. What's this they call it? And someone in the audience whispers, intellect. That's it, honey. What's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup, she uses a metaphor here, if my cup won't hold but a pint, and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have a little half measure full? So she's not even having the argument that men and women are equal, right? She's just saying, look, by your own argument, if I've got a little less, if my little cup will only hold so much intellect and yours holds so much more, it doesn't hurt you to share a little bit with me, right? So if we go back to that question, the core of her argument is that men shouldn't continue denying or fearing women's access to equal rights. You can't deny her access because she's proven it over the course of her life, right? She's not a dainty woman that needs to be protected. And she also is not a threat, right? Giving her a little bit of freedom is not going to diminish the freedom of others. So that's our best answer.